Something that I am also trying to learn is how to find different inspiration other than just looking at like shot deck or frame set
Yeah.
and looking at other DPs work. How do you find the other inspiration or other mediums to kind of influence your art?
That's a wonderful question, and something I've thought about a lot the last couple years, because I think sometimes it can start to be a little bit of this echo chamber, you
It's
know?
redundant, I feel like. You start seeing other DPs work, then you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna create my own," but it's kind of the same because you're
Mhm.
influenced by
Yeah,
that.
for sure. I think especially when it's coming from, I don't know if there's like a date past which, like, if you look at something old enough, now it's fair game to like ape it, you
Hmm.
know what I mean? But like the new, yeah, especially when if like all you're consuming is Vimeo and Instagram, like it's just going to be the same regurgitated stuff. And yeah. So I've been, yeah, I mean, dude, the obvious answers are like, photography, photo books, photo exhibits, like that stuff is really a wonderful inspiration. I've
Hmm.
found to be a wonderful inspiration. Looking at older films, doing what we discussed before, which is like, I love Paul Thomas Anderson. Who does Paul Thomas Anderson love, and who does that director love, and where did they get inspired? Is also really amazing. But I've really found in the last couple of years, and here's me like stepping into, a place that's a little pretentious.
That's all right. I love it.
Forgive me. I've found architecture has been a really big inspiration for me in cinematography. I kind of got a fascination with it right about just before COVID, and like over COVID, when we were all just sort of cooped up. I spent a lot of time. I bought architecture books, and I was reading a lot about a handful of architects that I was really interested in, and their work. And then when things opened back up, I was able to, on different travel jobs, go visit some of these places.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, dude, it's amazing. It's like a scavenger hunt. Anytime I go
Mm.
anywhere in the U.S., any city I shoot in, I look up Frank Lloyd Wright houses or buildings near this city, and then like I'll take a day, rent a car, and go drive out to look at this thing.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, it's amazing. But dude, um, it's really inspiring. There's the literal sort of connection, which is like how architecture uses lead lines and light and structure
Mm.
to frame certain spaces and stuff, and then. Um, there's all that, but there's the philosophical side of it too. That like the way that I think Wright specifically, or some of the modernists, like Mies van der Rohe, approached architecture. The philosophy that they brought to it is so different, and so trying to sort of take inspiration from places like that is really useful. I'll give you one example of it, to make sense of it. Frank Lloyd Wright, who's the one that I really like, you could probably tell, is did something with a lot of his houses that he called compression and release. So when you
Mm.
go into a building, he wanted to give it the feeling of, you would go into his buildings and it's a really tight space. The entry area was always really tight and a little oppressive. And then when you walked out into the living room, the main area, whatever it was like stepping outside. So you were coming inside, but because he had compressed you into the space, when you came out of it, it was like a breath of fresh air
Wow.
walking into the living room. You know what I mean? Or whatever
Mm.
the space was, the main hallway, the workspace, whatever building it was. But translating that into film, the idea of like, using darkness and silhouette at a moment before you release when somebody's walking down a hallway, instead of it just being
Mm.
lit the whole hallway, it's like it's dark the
Going
hallway.
in and
You
out
let
of light.
exactly that diversity, but also again, sort of forcing the audience down into this little space and then letting them open up into something else.
Oh, I love that.
Um, yeah,
I think
it's one,
that's
and that's one example. There's so much. There's
no,
so much
that's
there.
I appreciate you saying that because sometimes I hear people talk about their influences of like photo books, and I'm like, how does this translate to art? I feel like you're just talking like out in the abyss, but like you just said something very practical
Yes,
that
yes.
actually made sense to me.
That's the literal translation. Again, there is the more sort of nebulous, like philosophical stuff about form versus function and all that. But there's also, yeah, some literal like one-to-one stuff that's I've found really exciting,
Mm.
and inspiring. To be able to pull from those different places, and refreshing. Because again, I think you could get bogged down in just sort of regurgitating the same shit over and over, and
100%.
and it's not so fun.